In just 47 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actors went from polite guest to furious icon, tearing into Jonathon Ross with such ferocity that the host was left speechless. What started as friendly banter descended into a full-blown war of words that ended with Ian McKellen storming off set, leaving an entire studio in shocked silence. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure you subscribe to the channel for daily videos exposing Britain's darkest scandals. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the drama. Last night's episode of The Jonathon Ross Show promised to be a celebration of theatre, film, and British talent. Sir Ian McKellen, the legendary actor known for his roles in Lord of the Rings and X-Men, was scheduled to discuss his latest stage production and reflect on his incredible career spanning over 6 decades. The atmosphere in the studio was electric as the audience settled into their seats, eager to hear stories from one of the greatest actors of our generation. Jonathon Ross bounded onto the stage with his usual energy, greeting the crowd with waves and his trademark cheeky grin. Ian McKellen followed shortly after, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. The two shook hands as McKellen took his seat on the famous couch, the studio lights gleaming down on them both. "Sir Ian, welcome back to the show," Jonathon began, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "Always a pleasure to have you here." "Thank you for having me, Jonathon," McKellen replied warmly, settling into the cushions. The first few minutes proceeded smoothly enough. They discussed McKellen's new production of King Lear at the National Theatre, with the actor providing fascinating insights into playing the tragic monarch for the 5th time in his career. Jonathon asked about the physical demands of the role, and McKellen spoke eloquently about the challenges and rewards of performing Shakespeare at his age. "You're 78 now, is that right?" Jonathon asked, though there was something in his tone that made a few audience members shift uncomfortably. 85, actually," McKellen corrected with a patient smile. "But who's counting?" 85, bloody hell," Jonathon said, his eyes widening. "So, how much longer can you keep doing this? The physical stuff, running around on stage, all that." McKellen's smile tightened slightly at the edges. "Well, Jonathon, I intend to keep acting as long as I'm able. Age is just a number, and I feel more passionate about the work now than ever before." Sure, Jonathon said, nodding but not really listening. "But there must come a point where you think, maybe it's time to hang up the tights and let some younger actors have a go." The audience went quiet. McKellen straightened in his seat, his hands folding deliberately in his lap. "I don't believe experience and talent should be put out to pasture simply because of a number, Jonathon. The theater thrives on diversity of all kinds, including age." Jonathon laughed, but it sounded forced. No, of course. I just mean, there's all this talk now about making space for new voices, diverse voices. Maybe that includes, younger voices too. Younger voices are wonderful and should absolutely be championed," McKellen said, his voice measured but firm, "but not at the expense of dismissing those who have dedicated their entire lives to the craft. There's room for everyone." Jonathon seemed to sense he'd touched a nerve but pressed on anyway, perhaps thinking he could turn it into banter. "Right, but come on, mate. You've had a good run, won all the awards, made all the money. Wouldn't it be more graceful to step aside rather than clinging on?" The temperature in the studio dropped several degrees. McKellen's expression shifted from patient to genuinely offended. "Clinging on? Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I'm just saying," Jonathon continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension. "There comes a time when everyone needs to accept they're past their prime. Look at footballers. They retire in their 30s. Actors. Well, maybe it takes a bit longer. But still, comparing actors to footballers is absurd," McKellen said, his voice rising slightly. "Acting isn't about physical peak performance. It's about emotional depth, technical skill, and life experience. Things that actually improve with age." Jonathon held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. Don't get your knickers in a twist. I'm just having a laugh." "Are you?" McKellen asked pointedly. "Because it sounds rather like you're suggesting I'm too old to do my job, which is not only insulting but remarkably ignorant." The audience was dead silent now, sensing this had gone beyond playful ribbing into something much more uncomfortable. Jonathon's smile wavered, but instead of backing down or apologizing, he doubled down with a nervous laugh. "Come on, Ian, you're being a bit sensitive, aren't you? I'm just asking the questions everyone's thinking. Are they? McKellen challenged. Or are you projecting your own ageist attitudes onto the audience? Jonathan's face flushed red. Ageist? That's a bit much, don't you think? Is it? McKellen leaned forward, his eyes sharp and focused. You've spent the last 5 minutes suggesting that I'm too old to work, that I should step aside, that I'm somehow clinging desperately to relevance. What would you call that? I'd call it honest conversation. Jonathan shot back, his own temper starting to show. Something you celebrities aren't used to anymore. Everyone blowing smoke up your arse all the time. The audience gasped. This had crossed a line from awkward to actively hostile. McKellen's jaw tightened. Honest conversation? You invite me onto your program to discuss my work, then spend the entire time insulting me. That's not honesty, Jonathan. That's rudeness disguised as edginess. Oh, here we go, Jonathan said, throwing his hands up. Can't take a joke so suddenly I'm the villain. This is exactly what's wrong with everyone these days. Too bloody sensitive. There's a difference between a joke and disrespect, McKellen said, his voice like steel. And you've clearly lost the ability to tell them apart. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. You know what? Maybe you are too old for this. Can't handle a bit of back and forth without throwing a tantrum. The words hung in the air like a bomb. The audience collectively held their breath, waiting to see how McKellen would respond. For a moment, the legendary actor sat perfectly still, his face a mask of controlled fury. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but absolutely lethal. A tantrum? I've been sitting here while you've belittled my career, my age, and my relevance. I've watched you mistake cruelty for humor and arrogance for charisma. And now you're calling my justified response a tantrum? Jonathan seemed to realize he'd gone too far, but pride wouldn't let him apologize. Look, mate, if you can't handle the heat, don't you dare. McKellen cut him off, his voice rising. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I've been working in this industry since before you were born, Jonathan. I've faced real criticism, real challenges, and real adversity. What I won't face is disrespect from someone who thinks a chat show gives them the right to tear people down for entertainment. It's my bloody show, Jonathan snapped, his composure finally cracking completely. I can ask whatever questions I want. Yes, it's your show, McKellen agreed, standing up from the couch. Which makes your behavior even more disgraceful. You have a platform, an audience, and you choose to use it to mock a guest who came here in good faith. Jonathan stood up too, the two men now facing each other across the coffee table. In good faith? You came here to promote your play. And you're getting promotion. What's the problem? The problem, McKellen said, his voice shaking with anger now, is that you don't understand the difference between promotion and humiliation. You think you're being clever, but you're just being cruel. Oh, piss off, Jonathan said, waving his hand dismissively. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I've had hundreds of guests on this show, and none of them have reacted like this. Perhaps none of them had the courage to call you out, McKellen replied. Or perhaps you've never been quite this disrespectful before. Either way, I'm not going to stand here and be your punching bag. Jonathan laughed bitterly. Punching bag? I asked you a few questions about your age. That's it. You're acting like I attacked you personally. You did attack me personally. McKellen's voice echoed through the studio. Every single thing you've said has been a personal attack disguised as casual conversation. You've implied I'm past it, that I'm selfish for continuing to work, that I can't handle criticism, and now you're gaslighting me by pretending it was all harmless. The audience was completely transfixed. Some people looked uncomfortable, others shocked, but everyone was absolutely glued to what was happening on stage. Gaslighting? Jonathan scoffed. Now you're just throwing words around. This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous, McKellen said, picking up his notes from the coffee table, is that I expected better from you. I've been a guest on this show multiple times over the years. I've always found you entertaining, if occasionally crass. But tonight, you've shown your true colors, and frankly, they're quite ugly. Oh, come on, Jonathan said, his voice taking on a pleading quality now. Don't be like this. Sit back down. We'll move on to another topic. Move on? McKellen's eyebrows shot up. So you can insult me about something else? No, thank you. I have better things to do with my evening than be your comedic fodder. "You're being completely unreasonable," Jonathon insisted, but his voice lacked conviction now. He could see he was losing control of the situation entirely. "Am I?" McKellen turned to address the audience directly. "Let me ask all of you something. If someone invited you to their home, then spent the entire time telling you that you were too old, that you should retire, that you were clinging to relevance, would you sit there and take it? Or would you have the self-respect to leave?" Several audience members nodded in agreement. One person even started clapping before quickly stopping when they realized no one else was joining in. Jonathon's face went even redder. "Don't drag them into this. This is between you and me. Everything happening on this stage is for them." McKellen gestured to the crowd. "That's what you seem to forget, Jonathon. This isn't your private living room where you can say whatever you want without consequences. This is a public platform, and you have a responsibility to treat your guests with basic human decency." "I treat my guests just fine," Jonathon protested weakly. "No," McKellen said firmly. "You treat them like props for your jokes. You treat them like they should be grateful for the privilege of being mocked by you. Well, I'm not grateful. I'm insulted, I'm disappointed, and I'm leaving." "Ian, wait," Jonathon said, taking a step forward. "Let's just calm down and—" "I am calm," McKellen interrupted. And it was true. His anger had crystallized into cold, dignified fury. "I'm perfectly calm. What I'm not is willing to participate in this farce any longer. If you walk out of here, you'll look like an idiot," Jonathon said, and there was a desperate edge to his voice now. "People will think you can't take a joke." "Let them think what they want," McKellen replied. "I'd rather look oversensitive than stay somewhere I'm not respected. Some things are more important than public perception, Jonathon, though I suppose you wouldn't understand that." That final barb hit home. Jonathon's face twisted into something ugly. "You know what? Fine. Bugger off then. See if I care. You're not the first guest who's thrown a strop, and you won't be the last." "Thrown a strop?" McKellen's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you're calling this? Not standing up for myself, not refusing to be disrespected, but throwing a strop? You really are delusional." "Get off my stage," Jonathon said, pointing toward the exit. "If you're going to go, then go. Stop making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" McKellen looked genuinely incredulous. "Jonathon, you started this the moment you decided to use my age as a punchline. You escalated it when you told me I was clinging on. You made it worse when you called my response a tantrum. Every single step of the way, you've made this situation worse. And now you're trying to make me the villain for refusing to tolerate your nonsense?" The audience was completely silent, watching this conflict unfold like witnesses to a car crash. The producers were undoubtedly losing their minds in the control room, but no one seemed willing or able to intervene. "I don't need this crap," Jonathon muttered, running his hand through his hair. "I've got better things to do than argue with someone who can't take constructive criticism." "Constructive criticism?" McKellen's voice rose again. "You called me old, past my prime, and suggested I was taking opportunities from younger actors. That's not constructive. That's just nasty. And the fact that you can't see the difference is perhaps the saddest part of all of this." "Whatever helps you sleep at night," Jonathon said dismissively. "Go on then. Off you go. I'm sure Twitter will love this. Old actor has meltdown on talk show. Great publicity for your play." McKellen stared at him for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quiet but carried clearly through the studio. "You know what the real tragedy is, Jonathon? You had a chance to have a genuine conversation with me. You could have asked about my craft, my experiences, what I've learned over decades in this profession. You could have made good television that actually meant something. But instead, you went for cheap laughs at my expense, and now you're trying to spin your own rudeness as my failure. That's not just unprofessional. It's pathetic." Jonathon opened his mouth to respond, but McKellen held up a hand. "I'm done," the actor said. "I'm not going to stand here and trade insults with you. That's your style, not mine. I came here tonight expecting a pleasant conversation. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks being offensive is the same as being interesting. So yes, I'm leaving. Not because I can't handle it, but because I don't have to." With that, Sir Ian McKellen turned on his heel and walked toward the edge of the stage. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or remain silent, So an awkward smattering of claps echoed through the space, along with a few supportive cheers. "This is absolutely mental," Jonathon called after him, but his voice sounded hollow now, almost desperate. "You're seriously going to walk out over nothing?" McKellen paused at the steps leading off the stage. He turned back one final time, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "It's not nothing, Jonathon. That's what you don't understand. It's not nothing when you tell someone they're too old to do what they love. It's not nothing when you suggest they're being selfish for continuing to work. It's not nothing when you disrespect someone's entire life's work on national television. To you it might be nothing. It might just be another Tuesday, another guest to mock for ratings. But to me, and to everyone watching who's ever been made to feel less than because of their age or experience, it's everything." "Oh, give me a break," Jonathon said, but his heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. "You're being so dramatic. I'm an actor, Jonathon. Drama is what I do. But this?" McKellen gestured between them. "This isn't drama. This is just sad. You're better than this, or at least I thought you were. Clearly, I was mistaken." Jonathon laughed, but it sounded forced and uncomfortable. "So that's it then? You're just going to flounce off?" "I'm not flouncing," McKellen said calmly. "I'm leaving with my dignity intact. There's a difference, though I suspect you're unfamiliar with the concept." "Sod off then," Jonathon muttered, turning away from him. "See if I give a damn." But McKellen was already descending the stairs, his posture straight and proud despite the chaos of the moment. The audience watched him go, and this time the applause was louder, more certain. People stood up, showing their support for the legendary actor as he made his exit. Jonathon stood alone on the stage, trying to maintain his composure, but the cracks were showing. He forced a laugh, addressing the audience with false bravado. "Well, that was unexpected," he said, but his usual confidence had evaporated. "I suppose some people really can't handle a bit of banter," but the audience wasn't buying it. The energy in the room had completely shifted. They'd witnessed something real, something raw, and Jonathon's attempts to downplay it only made him look worse. As McKellen reached the edge of the studio, a production assistant tried to approach him, presumably to smooth things over or convince him to return. The actor politely but firmly shook his head, said something quiet that couldn't be heard by the microphones, and continued walking. The camera stayed on him until he disappeared through the exit doors, and then cut back to Jonathon, who was still standing on the stage looking somewhat lost. He tried to recover, to move on to the next segment, but the damage was done. "Right then," he said weakly. Let's take a quick break, shall we?" But everyone knew that no commercial break could erase what had just happened. Sir Ian McKellen, one of the most respected actors in British theatre and film, had just walked off the Jonathon Ross show after being subjected to ageist comments and disrespectful treatment. And he'd done it with his head held high, refusing to compromise his dignity for the sake of entertainment. The studio doors swung shut behind him, leaving Jonathon Ross to face the consequences of his own actions, and an audience that had just witnessed what happens when respect meets disrespect, and dignity refuses to back down.